Welcome back to Why Blank Lost. I'm David Bloomberg, or as Star would call me, Uncle DB. Back with me this week is my co-host, Aunt JL. I mean, Jessica Lewis.
I am back, and I'm so sorry to have missed you all last week, but I am truly grateful to have Lindsay step in, and she did a great job going through all of the particulars with David, the other David, not this David. Yes. So thank you for that. But I'm glad to be back, and we have another fantastic guest.
Yes, as video viewers can already see, we are excited to have a special guest star to discuss Star Chappell.
Hey, thank you so much. This is my first time here. I'm very excited. I'm nervous as well because I got to get these rules right. And I think this is a great episode to talk about because I have a lot of questions about why X lost this time, and I think that I think we got to talk some stuff through. So thank y'all for having me.
Sure, this is going to be so much fun. And you are a star, Chappell. We were talking about that earlier. You are absolutely fantastic in all the work that you do. So it's really great to thrust you into our world, and we'll see how this all shakes out. I'm very excited.
I'm happy to be here. And, I talk about Survivor with Rob on Club Condo, but it's not really a strategy podcast. And so this is going to be like the first time I got to do that, so because normally we're just being goofy over there on Mondays. And so, this will be very fun for me and a little different side of Chappell this time.
All right. Well, we're looking forward to it. Now, Chappell, did you know that in this episode, we got to see Jessica's favorite challenge?
Oh, was this your challenge, huh? This is what you like?
No, I hate it with a passion. This, oh, really?
Oh no, David.
This is the
wait, my whole boob is almost hanging out. He's coming out of my mouth, for God's sakes. It's terrible. Okay, I was literally drowning in the sand. It was horrifying. I thought I was going to die. It was sand up my nose, in my mouth. Obviously, I didn't realize my top was falling down. Thank goodness for blurring. All just terrible, bad. And I will say, they have since made an adjustment to that challenge because we were bound so tight around our waist. You could not use your hands. The way that Jeff was like telling them, oh, yeah, you got to use your hands. That's what you got to do. You couldn't do that. When this was the first time that Jeff decided to tie people up. And he,
as far as you know,
enjoyed it. Oh, okay. For purposes of Survivor, I will say. And he thoroughly enjoyed himself. Yes, so not great. I still have scars from those damn things, like both on my shins and on my wrists.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
and mental scars, which
very much so. Yes. So thanks for bringing up the bad memories.
Sure, absolutely.
And this whole episode was just all kinds of things.
I know it
really loves, right?
Yeah. Talk about rocks now, right? You got your real rock star shirt on. I see you.
I know. I thought this was very appropriate considering all of the discussions being had surrounding rocks, and we're talking about Star. So my shirt says it all as far as this episode.
Yes, I did want to mention that in the sand snake or whatever you want to call the challenge, I guess after Andy last season used his mouth to carry the ball, they were just like, hey, let's make all of them use their mouths in this challenge to carry stuff, so
Camilla was hysterical during that whole challenge. She was very, very enjoyable. I love her because she's clearly just calling everything out for like really seriously.
Yes,
it looks miserable. I just would not want to do this challenge at all. Like, I just would, if like I'd opt out for whatever, like, hey, I'll take a punishment, like whatever. Like, I don't know. This is to me, it just doesn't seem pleasant. It doesn't seem like something that I'd be good at either. And so I just would be dreading something like this.
Yeah. And what's terrible about the challenges, I will say, is you don't know what you will be good at and what you won't be good at. And looking at the challenge, I'm like, oh, this shouldn't be too bad. Like I'm pretty strong. Like and then no, I was dying. And like other challenges that I thought I was going to be really bad at, I did really great at. So it's like, you just never know what you're actually going to be good at. So now I know I'm bad being bound and crawling through sand. So I know this about myself.
Good to know. But what we are good at is talking about why a specific player lost. And so we will be doing that, of course, again. We will compare Star's game to my rules for winning that I originally wrote way back after season 1 and have been updating ever since, using all the non-spoiler information available to us from what we saw on TV, interviews, social media, and secret scenes. And of course, the newest published version of the rules can be found at robhaswebsite.com/yxlostfeed. But before we address how Star did in terms of the rules, we always have some other things to discuss. And I want to start by taking apparently a very controversial position. I am surprised, though perhaps I shouldn't be, that so many Survivor viewers are jumping on various players and saying they're not doing anything. They're just sitting there waiting to get picked off. Because I guarantee that each of them, other than maybe Mary, who's not in a great place, has a plan. You know, I think that Camilla expects to find a way to the end with Kyle. Mitch probably feels like he has an ally in Shaheen. Kyle and Shaheen know they need to find a way to do something about Joe and Eva, but they need to do it at the right time or else they become the new targets. Now, some of them are undoubtedly being fooled, but that doesn't equate to them doing nothing. I think we all need to remember back to the edits that Jamie and Lauren were getting in Survivor 44, where it appeared like they were doing nothing, to the point that they got so frustrated they blew up on social media. Like, we're not that stupid. You know, we know things are going on. But we then later found out they were being actively fooled by Jam Jam and Carson. And each of Jamie and Lauren thought they had a path to the end because of that. So does it mean that people like Mitch and maybe even Camilla, they're not going to have a path to the end? And, you know, they're just getting fooled? Maybe. But, you know, our 3-time guest, Dr. Jeremy Faust, has a saying that he has brought up a few times, which is that Survivor players these days are professionals. You know, and I tend to agree with him for most of them. Maybe not David. But you know, someone like Mitch isn't just sitting there waiting to be picked off. Shaheen doesn't truly believe he can go to the end and beat Joe and Eva. He's smarter than that. Something is going to break. They just don't want to make a move too soon.
I do want to just add my 2 cents in here, though. As far as Mitch is concerned, I have concerns that Mitch is not actively playing as much as he should be, based upon his own commentary that he's giving during the episodes when he's in the confessionals, where he's actually acknowledging the fact that he's playing a safe game and that, you know, people are going to be sitting on their couches yelling at him, saying he needs to do something. And he's putting limitations on himself based upon what's happening in the game, where he says, I can't make moves with people I don't trust. And so I am fearful that Mitch is not pushing the way that he necessarily should be pushing, because he has fallen into this safer space of, well, at least I'm in 6 instead of taking a risk and having to go with people I don't trust. But it is true. When you play this game of Survivor, you play with people you don't trust, because you can't fully trust anyone. And he is not in a position where he can really say that he can even trust the group of 6 that he's a part of, allegedly, because they're also not being honest with him. So I have some very real concerns about Mitch and his being just based upon what he said himself. I mean, he's made admissions himself.
Yeah. I'll be a Mitch defender as well. I think that if anything, you know, David brings up the edit from, you know, Lauren and Jamie that time, but the editing this season has been abysmal. They've literally hid stuff from us completely.
Yes.
To where if you're watching the show and you're taking what you see at face value, you don't know why these things are happening at all. They just happen. You're like, oh, was there a flip? Well, who started it? Who okayed it? You never know what happened. We don't know who's voting for who. And so this week we get Mitch going, you know, like, I want to make a move, but I can't make a move yet. I can't make a move yet. I can't make a move yet. So all we see is like, Mitch, you need to make a move. You need to make a move. He won't make a move. He won't make a move. He won't make a move. So they're like burying him under this idea that something entertaining can happen, right? Like there's an avenue for him. And all he has to do is go to Rocks, and then we can shake all of this up. And for Mitch, is like, why would I go to Rocks right now? If I can make one more round, if I get to 7, then it might sound like a better time to flip. But but flipping now to now go to Rocks And then, you know, it doesn't really benefit him. But the way the show is painting it is like he's like the one barrier between us having good TV and us having not good TV. And I think that's why everybody's so mad. We're like, do something, not for him. They don't care if Mitch wins. They want us to have good TV. Yeah, they just want us to see something exciting on TV. And he's like the avatar for, you know, the boring thing that everybody thinks is about to happen in this season. And so I think that people are being unfair to Mitch for sure, but I also think the editing this season is like almost unforgivable. I think they've been doing pretty cool stuff with the challenges. I think the last week's challenge with David versus Joe was so gripping. You know, like that's how you build suspense. But then this week they got this like bumblebee flying in front of his face. Like, I don't care. You know, like I think that they have to pick their spots. And I think that in the strategy portions of this, they've been leaving so much out that we don't know, you know, what is actually happening. And we just have so little to go off of.
All of that I think is so on point, because if there is one thing that I've learned from being on the show, they can edit out entire relationships. No one knew that I was super close with Adam because they just didn't include it in the edit because they wanted to make it appear as if I was really close with Ken. I was really close with both of them. And so there is so much to be said about the edit portion and what we aren't getting. And so that's why I am hoping that those clips that we're seeing of Mitch are part of that editing issue where they're feeding into that belief that, oh, no, look, they're not doing anything, when in actuality, we're just not seeing it because of the edit. So I am very curious to see what we're going to learn as the season progresses. And when we finally hear from Mitch, it'll all be very interesting to see how it all comes together.
Yeah. And that's why I think, you know, like knowing about you and Adam and then rewatching it, there are a couple hints. There are a couple small scenes where it was like you said something like, oh, I'll go tell Adam. And you're thinking, well, why would Jessica be the one to tell Adam if you don't know? You know, but it makes sense in that context. And here, I think the scene that did it for me was when Mitch went and talked to Shaheen and said, hey, you know, she wants us to flip. And Shaheen's like, well, who do they want to do it? Flip onto? And Mitch says, onto you, fool. Now, you don't talk like that to someone unless you're friends. You're close. You feel you have a relationship with them. That's why I think he believes, true or not, he believes that he has something going on the side with Shaheen that is going to lead him further into the game. You know,
I think he should believe that too. I think that, like, honestly, if you're looking at Shaheen as a potential ally, you got to be thinking there's no way Shaheen wants to go to the end with Joe and Eva, right? Like, there's got to be no way. Like, eventually he's going to be like, all right, Mitch, let's do our thing. You know, the same way Camilla is looking at Kyle, like, eventually this is going to happen, right? You might not be ready to go to Rocks right now, but eventually you're going to realize, that's not a thing that's that's viable. The issue that I'm having with them, you know, with this like one more week, is that while they're worried about Joe and Eva, those two people are still most likely to win immunity in any given challenge, it seems like at this point. And then on top of that, she has two advantages. So let's say she wins immunity and she gives him one. Then now what do you do? Now who are you voting out? Are you going back to Mitch? Now, Mitch, what are you going to do? Are y'all all turning on Shaheen? You know, like now I feel like they've put themselves in a position where they have two. I think she loses her safety. Is it safety wild power, right?
Yeah.
At 7.
Yeah.
She loses at 7. This is 8. So it's like next round. Like if I'm her, I'm playing it. Why not? What is it gonna do? Like if Joe wins immunity, all right, Joe, handle tribal council. I'll be back. You know, I'll see you at the camp. And, like, you know what I'm saying? So like, it's frustrating because I need them to make a move on Joe and Eva sooner than later because they're the people who are most likely to get to 4 and take each other. Yeah, Eva doesn't have to go to fire because he's going to take her. So now what are you going to do? You know, and so that's why where my frustration is. But I definitely think that the edit is not doing them any favors.
Yeah, I agree. Now, I do think you bring up a good point, and I think I plan to get to it in Appendix A. I don't remember, but which is she does have these trinkets. So if you were going to flip on Eva at this moment, which a lot of people wanted them to do, a lot of people are like, why was Eva's name never brought up? Why are they not going after Eva? You would have to keep it so secret that not a hint of it got back to Eva, or she would just be like, blink, here's one of my trinkets.
Yeah.
You know, and so it makes it even more difficult. But even with that said, Chappell, you mentioned a little while ago, you know, the 4 of them are not going to march down to the end in all likelihood. You know, They shouldn't. And
Right.
watching the edit, I am honestly surprised that anyone believes, any viewer believes, the Strong Four are going to make it to the end together, because there was not one, but two separate scenes of Eva talking about how certain she was that they're locked in and she's not at all concerned about anyone coming against them.
Yeah.
Which tells me she has a lot of reason to be concerned, because showing us those scenes, those are bright, flashing red harbingers of doom for her. You know, there's no way. I mean, I agree with you completely about the editing being terrible this season, but there's no way they could give us scenes of her saying things like, they can't stop us, and I feel unconcerned with the next few votes. There's no way they're
having tribal council, for God's sake.
Well, I mean, there's no way that she's saying that, and they're showing us confessionals of her saying that, if it's actually going to be that smooth.
Yeah. Jessica, I have a question. So when you're on the island and you're saying we should get somebody, you're expecting that to be on the show. And so for these people, this entire episode, nobody uttered Eva's name as a possible target, a person that they know like most of them know she has two advantages. Most of them are aware of it, you know, so a person has two advantages and nobody's saying her name. It's like, they're leaving that out on purpose. There's no way her name didn't come up immediately after Joe's, you know, but it felt like it went from like, oh, we can't get Joe, let's go get Star or Mitch or Mary. It's like, what? Why?
Well,
you know, that's what's confusing to me.
Interesting. Well, and it's interesting too, because I can actually relate that back to one of the episodes when we had just merged and we had our first immunity challenge. I was number one on the chopping block. Like, they were like, Jessica is going to be the merge boot. We're voting her out, which is why I went into that challenge. Like, I have to win this challenge. And it came down to Will and I, and Will ended up winning. And I thought for sure, I'm like, that's it. I'm toast. I'm going home. But then there was something that happened between Adam and Will, and then all of a sudden, like, things were shifting, and I was told right afterwards by Zeke that, like, you're not the target anymore, it's somebody else. All of that was left out. Like, when I was the one that was being targeted, I was told later by production that we ended up not including that in the story because of where things ended up at the very end. And so, like, that portion of the story didn't then become it wasn't integral to what ended up happening in the very end, but there was a hint of it in a confessional that Jay gave where he talked about me in that particular episode. So it's interesting what they do choose to show, because if it's not significant for whatever the end result is, they will just leave it out. And I'm certain that somebody said, what about Eva? I mean, you can't tell me Star wasn't like going, hi, Eva, remember Eva? I gave her my idol. That, you know, so I would imagine that there's a reason why that was left out, but it had to have been said. It had to have been said. Yeah. Like, why are you going to Shaheen? Like, everyone suddenly, like, he's the other option. Like, well, I mean, we can't do Joe, so we're gonna do Shaheen.
Shaheen was the only name that Star knew how to say, apparently, from everything I've been
saying his name for weeks. Okay,
so but we'll get into that.
Yes.
But yeah, I suspect you're right that it was just cut, you know, because they probably said, well, we could go after her. And then they said, well, she is the idol in this thing. So if she finds out, it's all blown. So let's not even try that. That's my
bet. But to me, it's just kind of like, okay, well, when are you going to do it? You know, so it's like, as a viewer, it's frustrating because we all see that they all see that she has two public advantages. So it makes it so much more frustrating when you're at home.
And a very public relationship.
That's the problem, Jessica. We've been watching this public relationship blossom into a public advantage and a public relationship, to a public advantage and a public advantage and a public relationship. And you see it too. It's not a case where it's like, well, only some people know that they're super close, right? Or like, they don't know that she has. No, they actually do. And so that's why it's like we're all at home saying, do something, because you're going to run out of time. But I'm sure they are trying to figure something out. And it's just not coming together with the pieces that they have, but the show is not giving us that at all.
Right. Exactly. No. Exactly. And you would think with the extra half hour that they could put some of that in.
Oh, don't get me started.
Instead they have to, slow-mo on Joe and the fly.
And a fly.
Yeah. But yeah. Now I do want to pat myself a little bit on the back here. From last week, Jessica, you weren't here, but I noted that I expected the foursome of Joe, Eva, Kyle, and Shaheen to stick together after voting David out, because they went through a lot of trouble to get on the same page. So it wasn't, I felt they weren't going to instantly turn on each other the way a certain Rob and Steven thought they were. And, I also said, either on the podcast or social media, I can't remember which, that I did not see Kyle turning on Joe because of how close they were, at least at this point, which that was also shown to be correct, as Kyle specifically mentioned that. So, I'm riding a bit of a high here as far as those reads went. I guess we'll see if any of my predictions that I just made about everyone else, other than Joe and Eva, come true as the show goes on here.
I have a question about Appendix B when it comes to Kyle. And I know we are jumping the gun because Kyle's not who we're talking about lost, but he talks about how I can't take out Joe because no one's going to respect me on the jury if I go against the integrity thing, and it's like, at this point in the game, like, once you realize that the jury is going to be looking at that, are you backed into a corner where you have to play that way? Or is there any way you can sway the jury in your favor? Because David, if I'm David, I'm not voting for Joe. I'm just not. You can't you cannot go on this crusade against me. You cannot look at me and say I'm incapable of breaking, I physically cannot break my word and then break my word to me and then get my vote. Like, that's not a thing unless you immediately come back and admit it the next day. Like, if he's at tribal council going, yeah, we lied to David. We were never about integrity. We were always going to take him out. Then I'm like, okay, you got me. Like, I fell for it. But you can't get to the final tribal council like, I never lied to anybody. Like, that just doesn't work for me.
Right.
So what is a Kyle to do when you start looking at the jury and they're starting to look more like the Davids and Joes of the world? What do you do to win?
Well, yeah, and that's actually like one of the next couple points I was going to bring up was about that exact thing, because it is smart of him. And I just posted a video on this earlier today about it. It is smart of him to recognize, like, hey, we know that Kyle typically plays a strategic game. If it were up to him, he'd be backstabbing everyone and their brother. But he sees what's going on this season. He has a better read on this season, I think, than most people do on any given season. Yes. We have seen so many people show up at juries and have no clue what the jury is actually looking for. And he sees it ahead of time. So I do think that in some ways, to answer your question, Chappell, I do think he is somewhat caught up in that, depending on how everything shakes out. But I also think that with the failed attempt this week, where he was kind of helping Camilla to try and make the attempt against Joe, I think he's going to have to take a stand. Whether it's at 7 or at 5, I'm not 100% sure. I'll, have predictions later, but I mean, I've been wrong in those specific predictions for a few weeks now because I keep predicting Mary. And, but I think that he's leaning the right way, but you've got to make sure that, okay, you're presuming you get to the end and Joe and Eva are on the jury. And
because they have to vote for somebody.
Right. And so it's like, you're going to have to come up with a way to say, I followed the things, the morality that you're interested in, but I also played the game.
Yeah.
Jess, when you play with Kent, right? Like Ken, like his thing was the honor and integrity too, right? Like that was his thing. Like I never did.
Yeah.
Was that something where when he came up against the jury, are y'all like really holding his feet to the fire about that? Or is it just y'all were a jury that was going to respect more of what Adam did anyway? Like were y'all more like a more I won't say competitive, but like, more strategic jury versus Ken was like lying or not being true to his doctrine that he was preaching?
I think that the entire jury was really composed of people who were looking at gameplay as opposed to loyalty. But because that was such a significant part of Ken's game, that was why I kind of like tossed him a softball with the question I asked him, because I specifically wanted him to take that turn against David and turn it into a game move. When he was no longer loyal and decided I have to vote out David, I wanted him to step up and say, that was my strategy all along. I was playing with him because he knew how to play the game, and I was using him in the way that I needed to get to the end. And when I had a chance to take him out, I took him out, and that was my decision. I did that. If he had stepped up and done that, I think he probably would have impressed people on the jury, but that's not what he did. And so it's like, I was really hoping that it wasn't just all about loyalty with him, because I was someone who was playing very loyal, but also understanding you have to like play the game at the same time. And so I think that if he had done that and answered it in that way, then I think there might have been a bit of a pause with people on the jury, just because we were really looking at game and who had the best game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's, I said something similar last week when talking about David. Like, if David had been putting on an act and doing all these gameplay things where he had his own side alliance, but then criticized someone else for having a side alliance, and he lied, but then criticized someone else for lying. If he had, if his whole honor, integrity, loyalty thing had been an act, I'd have been like, good job. Good job.
That's how I feel about Joe right now too. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Yes, but I don't think Joe is as much on his high horse as David is.
Oh no! When someone tells me they're physically incapable of backstabbing somebody, that's when I'm like, okay, Superman, all right, slow down. So I don't know, but I feel the same way about both of them. I don't mind it if that is your strategy and you're gonna come out and say it, but you can't get to the end and be like, I am physically incapable to this day, and as we're all sitting on the jury being like, really, because
look at what we saw you,
right? Yeah. So we're crazy. You know what I'm saying? That's what that's the disconnect for me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I guess the way David, I think Joe is quieter about it. He doesn't walk around spouting it every 2 seconds. He doesn't put it into every conversation, whereas David seemed to do that. He if he had a shirt, if he had had my shirt that says honesty, integrity, loyalty on the front, he'd have been wearing that, ignoring the part about the scheme and plot on the back. But, so that's how I see the difference. But also getting back to Kyle, the other thing I wanted to talk about with him, besides his recognition of where the jury may be headed, is I feel like we've been given some good confessional content from him that could easily point to him winning, because he explained some of his strategy, and he said something that could almost have come out of our mouths in giving advice to players, because he said, I've kind of operated and played this game with little pushes. Everybody expects these big moves, but I think Survivor's a game that's won in the margins. Yes. I mean, I wanted to stand up and applaud. I guess I could have. I was home alone watching it, so nobody would have been looking at me funny, but still, that's the type of game he's talking about playing, and it could get him to the end, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen people do that, ones that have the little moves, the planting of the seeds. And what I will say, that you already mentioned it about Kyle, he seems to have the best understanding and read of everything that's going on with everyone. And it's really quite incredible that he's been able to create the relationships he has and keep some of them, so like with him and Camilla, so secretive that people aren't really noticing, but they kind of are. They're sensing it. Just very, very impressive gameplay all around. And that is someone who I think the jury can certainly respect, because it is a very thought out and methodical game that takes a lot of time and energy. And it isn't about this, big move. Look, this big move I made. No, it's all of these little ones that got me here. I think that he's doing a fantastic job with that.
Yeah, but he got to get rid of Joe or Eva, or he doesn't win.
Oh yeah, no, he absolutely.
You can't sit with those people. You're gonna lose. Yeah, you're gonna lose.
Right. He
that'll
definitely
be the
has
big
to get
move. Right.
Yeah.
That'll be the big move, and all these other little ones that'll get him there. Yeah.
Yeah. They got pray Eva doesn't play that advantage this week. Dear God, if they could just get her out now, this would be perfect, because she get that advantage and she has an idol, and then one immunity win away from fire. Come on, man. I'm
just gonna say it, even though I hadn't even thought about saying it in the predictions. I don't think she's gonna play it. I think she is so confident in her ability, and she doesn't want to, quote unquote, abandon her allies. I don't think she's going to play the advantage next week. So I think she's just gonna let it expire.
That's tough.
But
I'd be walking out so quick. Peace out.
Peace.
Good luck.
Yeah, exactly. Now, one other thing that she did, and Joe also did, this gets back to the jury management issue you brought up, Chappell. Those two were not as good at their attempts as for example, Kyle is being. I would call them ham-handed, as a matter of fact. Joe basically told Mary I'm doing jury management. Yeah, I mean, you don't say to someone, essentially, I'm being honest with you because when I vote you out, I want your vote on the jury. And then Eva was similar. You need to be a lot subtler about it. You can't just say we're doing this so you'll like us.
You have to appreciate Mary in those moments, though, because she was so much like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for telling me. I really appreciate it. It's just like, and it's just oozing with like sarcasm, but they can't tell. I loved that moment when she responded to both of them, like, oh yeah, we're good. We're good.
Yeah.
No,
I mean, that's the
not
smoking
good.
gun. Yeah, that's the smoking gun that they believe what they're preaching to everybody. Is that like, you would come to me and say this to me. The fact that you would say that to me is wild. It's like, okay, you lost your mind.
Yeah, like really, just keep voting with us. You're a number. We'll get rid of you when we need to.
Yeah. And then you can vote for us to win the $1 million.
Right.
I'd rather be dead. No, absolutely not. I'm a person that you get out in the pre-marriage. Like, you don't want me on the jury at any point. This is not a thing.
Oh, I love it. We'd have a feisty Chappell on the jury. I love that.
Survivor 51. Chappell is coming.
I'll be back at home before the marriage. Trust me on this one. First trip out.
Oh my gosh, it's great. Oh, good stuff.
All right. Well, do either of you have anything or anyone else you want to discuss before we get to the rules?
No, we should probably get started, right? It's like 34 minutes in.
Well, but before we do, of course, we have to mention that the rules we're about to discuss come in a shorter, much more colorful version in poster form. You can go to robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed, scroll down to the poster, click on it, order it, and it will be shipped directly to you. Or you can keep scrolling and get the poster on a t-shirt or the checklist on a t-shirt. And, click and order those. And we cover all of your Survivor rules needs at robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed.
That's right.
Well, Star said, we have spirit, and spirit goes a long way. And, while that may be true in certain parts of life, it's generally not true in Survivor. Spirit can make you fun to watch and even be around. But it needs to be accompanied by aspects of the game like strategy, building relationships, things like that. We know Star had spirit. So let's figure out which parts we're missing. Because at RHAP, we know Survivor and we know why Star lost. Now, we're going to do something a little different this week because there's really no way we can discuss several of these rules without interweaving, I guess, rule 7, which covers idols and advantages in game mechanics. Specifically, of course, Star's Beware advantage /idol, because it played a big role in many different aspects of her story arc. So rather than have a situation where we're talking about her strategic game and then Jessica says something about her idol and I say, wait, we have to wait till rule 7.
Let's just jump ahead.
Yeah, we'll just do it. And then, we'll talk about the things specific to rule 7 here and then interweave the idol stuff wherever it fits later on. So among those specific things with the Beware advantage, first, there was the utter lack of secrecy when she found it. She discussed in some of her interviews how things kind of spun out of control when she told Joe, and then they brought in Shaheen because Joe couldn't figure it out, and so on and so on. It was just too much. Either keep it a secret or make it public. Don't try to tightrope walk between the two. Tell some people before others. Hide it from exactly one person on your tribe. She ended up in this position where her survival in the game was dependent upon others who might or might not have told her how to solve the clue if that group had ever gone to tribal council.
Yeah, I was very uncomfortable with that whole component where and the fact that Thomas was even debating, well, let's just take it away from her and hide it. So then she couldn't even solve it if she wanted to. Speaks volumes about why secrecy is so important in a game like this when you do have an advantage, because people are going to scheme and plot against you when they know that you have an advantage. And in that moment, I thought, oh, good, we have a villain. This is so much fun, that Thomas wanted to do that. So I do think that there were so many components of that gameplay for her that just worked directly against everything that she needed to accomplish in that moment, where she's disappearing and everyone's noticing. And so suddenly all eyes are on her. And then she's telling person number 1 who tells person number 2, and then the person number 3, all of it just put her in a very, very tough spot. And I think that's probably part of the reason why a lot of the players have been talking about the inability to really work with Star, because you never really know where she's coming from. I think that probably started with that component of her game.
I just don't think she had the social capital from the beginning to pull off what she was trying to pull off. I think we
Yeah.
saw
Yeah.
Say do a very similar thing, right? Say went to the people that Say trusted, and they were like, we got to put our heads together on this. And then Say figured out what was going on. But Say did go and talk to people about it. For Star had nobody to talk to about it. She can't talk to Eve about it because it was very clear that Eve was targeting her. She goes to Joe, who's supposed to be like the honor and integrity guy. He throws her under the bus. When it gets to Thomas is like, let's just keep it away from her. Nobody actually had her back in that moment anyway.
Right.
A large part of the reason why I think Star lost, and I'm going to say it a billion times, is that just like socially, she just wasn't able to get ingratiated with them at all, to where even collecting the idol. And that's just probably the downside of like a Beware advantage like this, is that there used to be a time where you could find an idol and it's yours because you found it and that's all that it took,
Yes.
But now you might have to bring in all these other people, and maybe you can't. The idol is supposed to be able to save the people who can't save themselves. And now you're like, now I gotta go at the feet of all these other people to make it happen. It's really tough. So I think all of that just kind of like snowballs, and from there she's never able to recover.
Yeah. And then, you talk about it snowballing. So then at the swap, we're still continuing with the same topic. And, we, of course, saw Eva's challenge moment leading up to Star feeling closer to her, fessing up about the Beware advantage. And then Eva opening the cylinder and Star telling her, hey, just keep the idol. And, a wise man said on Blue Sky Wednesday, don't give your biggest op your idol completely unprovoked.
Yeah, that's definitely me. And again, I see where Star is going. She's like, I'm going to extend an olive branch. Look, you have not wanted to work with me this whole time. Let me give you something. But that is not what you need to give her. Give her something else. Give her your shot in the dark. Give her something else. But you cannot give her your idol. Because at this point, I think Star said in one of her exit interviews, the next day she heard Eva saying her name. It was like you gave your idol to somebody who didn't care. It's like it's like an olive branch to you, but for her, it's like it's just a thing that my enemy did. So it was just a mistake from jump.
Yeah, and I think the interesting part of her deciding to give it to Eva in that moment is, it was great for Eva, but it didn't have the same meaning to Eva that it necessarily had for Star, where, as you said, Star's trying to create a bond with her, trying to say, hey, let's work together. And Eva's just like, thanks, I got my crew. We're good. You just gave me a little trinket. I appreciate that, but I'm all set because I've already chosen who I'm going to work with. In a game like this, if you are going to share something that is so powerful, you need to make sure that you are on the same page with the person you're sharing it with. Otherwise, you really have put yourself in a horrific situation.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if she had a one-on-one conversation, like, Eva gives it back to her, and then later or the next day, Star pulls her aside and says, look, I feel like we've been on the wrong foot together. I want to work with you. This is our idol. We will share this idol. I'll hold on to it, but you opened it, so it's our idol. One of those BS speeches, because it's never our idol. But, but something like that. And I have to admit, in the moment when Star did it, I was caught up in it too. I think I said in the podcast, I was like, wow, this could work to her advantage. But you said that she said something about hearing Eva right away. We certainly saw it when they hit the merge, because Eva right to her group and forgot all about it. And from that point forward, we only heard her talk about my idol. No mention of where she got that idol. It was my idol, which, possession, in this case, possession isn't even 9/10 of the law. It's 10/10 of the law. But it was her idol. But nothing about where it came from.
Right. Yeah. And then even when Mary was like, hey, so would you play the idol? No. I mean, there wasn't it's mine. It's just mine.
It's so fascinating because Eva's so locked in with her alliance that she can't even be bothered to bring Star as like a potential of the number. We see so many people with other plus ones. David had like 3 of them. He wouldn't admit it, but he was like, I'm trying to build a bond with this person. I'm trying to build a bond with this person. He's the only person, the entire game I heard was trying to build a bond with Star since the merge.
Right.
Like he's the only one. So it's like, when Eva, we have an opportunity.
Mitch was trying to build a bond through swimming.
She was trying to show her how to swim. Yeah, and then the next day, he's like, Star, out of her mind, I would never work with Star.
Yeah,
she does vote for him. She does vote for him. Exactly. But you know, so that, you know, but it's just like, Eva, this is your chance to solidify something else with somebody outside of this core group of men, and she can't even be bothered to do it. So it's like, it's like a valiant effort for Star to like say, okay, I'm giving you the most powerful thing I have in this game. Please don't take me out. And they're like, nah, we're good. You know, it's just like, damn, you know? So that's why I say don't give it to them anyway. Like, I'd rather you play it or just be disruptive to their plans because you have the idol. Now they can't go, now they have to split the vote on you. Now you got a little bit more wiggle room, you know, where it's like, okay, I know the votes are coming to me, but I'm playing my idol, Mary. Let us vote for somebody else because it'll be you if it's not me. You know, something like that.
Yes, 100%.
So,
Yeah, Wiggle Room is the show you're doing on Monday night, by the way.
Oh God, yeah. The Wandoff is coming for all of y'all who have not submitted yet. So make sure you get your songs in.
Yes, definitely.
I'm sure Star submitted something at this point.
Well, I have heard that at least one of our guest co-hosts have submitted something, so we'll see if that one gets played.
Oh my goodness!
But yeah, so then moving on, even past the idol, and it'll come up again. Believe me, it'll come up again in Rule 1. It'll come up again in Rule 5, at least. But we also, I also want to go back to that wise man on Blue Sky, because he also said, when you don't have the numbers to make a move and everyone is telling you to play your shot in the dark, just play it.
Just play it.
Ta-da!
Just play it. Just play it. Like there's like a tiny percentage chance that maybe it's going to be on. He was like, you have no data to support that at all. I mean, that it's going to be on Mary. You have nothing because nobody has ever wanted to work with this game thus far. You know what I'm saying? Like this thus far, we only just started seeing Star's strategic elements recently, but like you got to know that Star was on the bottom when Chrissy was there saying, we got to make a move. Star was with her on the bottom. You know, she's just like, she's just fighting for her life. So it's like, by now you got to just, you got to just try to be as disruptive as possible as far as I'm concerned, because they're not working with you. Nobody has an alliance with you to the end. You're nobody's final 2. Who is nobody's final 2 at this point in the game? Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, they just weren't letting her in.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, so obviously she didn't, even after Jeff brought it up to her. And she said in interviews that she thought the others were targeting Mary and trying to get her to flush her shot in the dark because she believed that she had the numbers advantage in this vote. She told Mike Bloom, I really, really, really thought the numbers were on my side. And that's just because I'm a confident person. Sometimes it's to a fault. And, you know, she added to Dalton Ross, I'm so confident enough that I know for a fact, at least Original Loggy is not writing my name. But I did not know Original Loggy indeed wrote my name. You know,
they really did.
I do also question, and I mean, maybe it's just, you know, memory, but she kept insisting in her interviews that she thought the vote was going to be 5-4. It was an 8-person vote. I don't know. I mean, she must have meant 5-3, I presume. But, you know, okay, if it was going to be 5-3, then they don't need your vote. So play it. It goes back to that. If it was going to be a 1 vote difference, then yeah, okay, I can see that. But if it's going to be 5-3, if you truly believe that, then play it just in case, because everybody's telling you to.
Yeah. And you aren't always given gifts like that either, right? Where someone like flat out says, hey, listen, you should play your shot in the dark. Like you should just, and I know that there are times that it's part of gameplay to flush the shot in the dark. But at the same time, you know, it's either you or Mary. I mean, that's what the discussions have been. And everyone knows that that's what's going down, including you and Mary. You might as well just play it. Just play the damn thing. Yeah. Try. See what happens.
Yeah. It's tough.
I mean, I do think Star believing she knew what was really going on in the tribe is an overall issue, not just for this one instant. Which is a good jumping off point to go to Rule 1, which, of course, says to scheme and plot, because I think Star truly believed she was doing this.
Yeah.
The problem was, from what we could tell, she really wasn't.
She was getting a fake plan, David.
Right.
I just feel like she was scheming and plotting, and they were going, okay, yeah. You know, like, does she ever go to tribal council pre-merge? Like, is there ever a chance to vote? Like, is there ever a chance to even test that her alliance isn't lying to her? Right.
Yeah,
so, like, when she gets here, why would she think the Loggies would vote for her? They haven't voted for me yet. You know, they've been saying we're good.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, but the thing is, she knew some of the things were going on that weren't working to her advantage. You know, she told Dalton Ross that starting very early, she never had a number one in the tribe, and everyone else was pretty much locked in. And once they were locked in, there was no room for her. But she also said very early on the show, I've been hesitant to talk strategy because everyone's getting along so well. And she wondered if the others had been doing it. All future players. Wonder no more. The answer is yes. The answer is always yes.
Yeah.
You know, and then after watching episode 2, she posted on social media that this showed that the others never gave her a chance and they never liked her. They only tolerated her, and that hurt. And they would have voted her out if they had lost immunity. And one problem with this is she kind of admitted her own faults. She said they never gave her a chance, but like I just mentioned, she admitted she hadn't talked game to any of them.
Right.
We saw Thomas telling her, I've been waiting for you to say something to me.
Yeah.
We saw her running off to look for an idol early while everyone else was at camp talking. And yes, I fully understand while she's sitting at home watching this, it seemed mean. It seemed hurtful. The thing is that other players aren't there to give you a chance. They're there to win.
Well, and she even mentioned it in the tribal council, how she wasn't talking strategy even at that moment. She was like, I was talking about like cars and stuff. I mean, she actually admitted to not talking strategy right before what was going to ultimately be the most significant vote that she would be a part of, which I think really does speak volumes of her just missing. There was just something that was just missing there. I don't know if it's not, I can't read a room, but I can read a room because I know that they don't necessarily want to talk to me, but it's still fine. And I don't need to strategize with these people because maybe it's going to get worse if I do, but how can it get worse if nobody wants to talk with you? You got to at least try. So yeah, it was definitely something that she was lacking greatly throughout her entire from start to finish game that she played.
Yeah, to me, you can't strategize by yourself. You have to be able to talk to somebody about it. And she says, like, I'm having a hard time with this. But like she does, you know, Thomas says, I was waiting on you to come. And then what does Thomas do? I should throw her idol away. You know, like what? like, you know what I'm saying? Like that why do you think I haven't talked to you? You know, like I could see how wolfy you are toward me. You know, I've seen Star strategize. I remember when she comes down, she's like, what is it? Stop what you're talking about and open your ears. You know, and she's like, how do y'all feel about voting for Shaheen? And they go, yeah, no, but look, you know, I think Camilla and Guile might be together. You know, like they just completely shut it down, and we get the confessional with her saying, "I wanted to get Shaheen, but nobody's down for it, so I guess you got to go with the flow, or it's gonna be you next." That's what she said that herself. So if that's her mantra, is like, "I'm gonna try, and then I'm not gonna push too hard." Who is she gonna talk to? Mitch, who's like she's crazy. Mary, who's on the bottom with her. You know. Who David, who's a lockstep with Eva, who clearly just took her idol and hasn't talked to her since. You know, for me. She has a lot of flaws, and I think her social game is it wasn't built for this cast. And so because of that, if she wasn't bringing anything into the table, like the idol would have definitely helped. God, dear God, you know, like you could say, we have an idol. How can we use it to take out one of them? You know, but she had nothing. She had no currency in the game, and they didn't have any use for her.
Yeah, I do think in the early days, having the beware advantage hurt her in that regard because I felt she was using it as a tool to create relationships, but they weren't real relationships. You know, she needed to be using actual strategic and social play. She was relying too much on the beware advantage at that point and not enough on herself.
Yeah. I just don't know where else she's supposed to go in that tribe. You got the California girls who are like, we're the California girls and we're not going anywhere. Then you got Joe and Eva who's like, and Joe is like, I will give up my game for Eva. And then you have
I know. Yeah.
So now what's she supposed to do? Who's she going to go to? You know, like, okay, I go to Joe, he told Eva. I go to Thomas, he tries to hide my beret advantage. You know, it's like, I guess I'll just go to Bianca and pray. You know, it's like, you know, I don't really know. I just felt like she was in a tight spot from jump. But then everything after that, she had to be like super aggressive in playing. And I don't think she was aggressive enough. I think she was like so timid due to the social relationship she didn't have that by the time it came time to make some moves, they were like, yeah, Star's just here. She's just doing a lot of random stuff. We don't know what to do with her. I don't know. I just don't feel like there's a world where I would vote her out because who's going to vote for her in the end against me? You know, like I'm thinking.
Well, and I would have
bet money that she was safe. Yeah, like I would have bet money that she was safe. Like if I'm Shaheen, who am I going to sit next to? You know, like why not Star? You know, I guess maybe Mitch. But like, what you gonna go with Kyle? You gonna go with Joe? You gonna go with Eva? You're running out of pieces here. So I don't know. I'm very confused by the decision to take out her of all people.
And I do think that part of her problem early on in the game that put her in a predicament where she really wasn't connecting with people is the disappearing act that we did hear so many of them mention, where she was off looking for something. And it was because, as you said, David, she had this beware advantage and she was trying to solve it, which those first few hours when you are coming together as a tribe are the most significant moments, because that's the moment where people are like, you, me, that's it. We're done. Us three, we're working together. Okay. And if you don't move quick, you're going to miss the boat. And I really think that she was someone who probably thought, I can win these people over eventually because I have a great personality and they're going to love me. That's not how Survivor works. It works so fast. People don't take time to necessarily get to know you. They decide whether or not I can get a good read from you immediately and can we work together. So I think that was another hindrance for her, was one, the beware advantage and her desire, thinking like her charisma would carry her and then people would come to understand who she was and love her, when in the end that there's just no place for that in Survivor.
I agree.
Yeah, I'll have some ideas about that when we get to Rule 5, but Chappell, you mentioned that where was she going to go? And I think the problem is she just didn't get there fast enough. Like, yes, they had those relationships, but they didn't form the minute they got them. There was time. She just didn't use that time. But she also had other thoughts that didn't really go along with what we saw. Like, she had a secret scene where she talked about how she had been outwitting and outsmarting all these other people and playing since day one. But she clearly wasn't. We had other flashes of this with her believing she knew what was happening, but she didn't have it right. Even last week, as far as we saw, and you just referenced this, she only talked to David and Mary, thinking that they represented the entire majority. So that's why she was the only one other than those two who voted Mitch. If she had other good strategic connections in the tribe, she would have had a better idea of what was happening. And, Kyle even said it in tribal council. Star talked like she was the godfather. She had faith, exuded it. And I just mentioned a few minutes ago how she had said the same thing in her interviews about having faith in her reads when it came to the shot in the dark. The problem was her faith wasn't backed by facts.
Right. Yeah. I agree. Totally agree.
Now, I will also say I think that she had what I would call an interesting way of playing the strategic game. And it kind of links back to what happened early in her original tribe. And this gets to, Jessica, what you mentioned at tribal council, where she said, no, I didn't talk strategy, because if you ask someone if they have your name in mind, then it's paranoia. So, she talked about other things, which none of that is good. And I think at least some of this may go back to her being a new fan, because we need to remember she didn't watch the show till her son was born, less than a year before she went out there. And she did catch up on all the seasons. And I certainly feel she had a better handle on the game overall than David did. But as we've discussed before, binging like that doesn't necessarily get you a full understanding of the game unless you go deeper. I mean, we talked about this even in our preview podcast.
Yeah. I think when you're trying to cram so much into your brain and you're only focusing on the episode as opposed to, as you indicated, like the extra components that come with Survivor, you are missing it, because what we've already talked about on this podcast is the edit. You don't see everything with the edit. And I feel like if you are new to the Survivor world, then you're not going to understand that the edit does hide things, and the edit might not give you all of the information, and you might not know everything that you need to know going into it. So I do think that was a big part of her misunderstanding of the game as a whole, because she was relying so heavily on this binge component as opposed to necessarily understanding the game itself.
Right. David has rules, but Survivor isn't 1 + 1 = 2. It's just not. Like you see somebody say something to somebody else, thus this happened, and then they went home. So that's why it happened. I think David was the reason why David and Lindsay went so long last week is that David's telling people, like, you're watching this at home saying, or you're watching this at home saying, like, Charity goes home because Chrissy goes home because she spoke up. You know what I'm saying? It's like, no, that's not why she went home. She was already going home. She was going home before she even got there, But the show will lead you to believe, like, okay, I guess I should just be quiet at Tribal Council, right? So I don't go back. Like that kind of thing. So I think you're right. I think a lot of people watch your podcast specifically to get, to figure out how to play the game. And I think that by doing that, they get that extra nuance in a lot of ways that, like, if you just watch the show, that you won't get. And if you're not listening to exit interviews and all that kind of stuff, you really don't learn. You just learn what the show wants you to see. Exactly. And that could be what happened, or it could be just a cooler version of what the show thinks you want to see.
Right. And we talked about, on Survivor 44, I'm sure there are still people out there, not the people listening to this podcast, of course, who think Jamie and Lauren were do-nothings, who just sat there and went to their doom, while the rest of us, we know what actually happened there. Now, I do want to talk briefly about what led up to the vote in this episode. And we'll discuss more about what each other player was thinking in Appendix A. But for Star, she was trying to get Mitch, Mary, and Camilla to do a 4-4 tie and was sure someone would flip because the other side would not want to go to rocks. And the thing is, and Jessica, I obviously don't have to tell you this, a tight alliance is a lot more likely to go to rocks than a ragtag group of people put together just because they aren't part of the other group. They're not going to risk their games for people that they're not dedicated to. And, on top of that, and maybe especially for that, Mitch was one of the people that Star was counting on. And he was like, she's all over the place. She literally just wrote my name down.
Yeah. No, there is a lot to be said about coming to an impasse like that, where you do have two groups that are so solid that no one is willing to budge, no matter what is said and no matter what concerns. And I know in that moment, I certainly did not want to go to rocks, but I also knew I can't flip because my game is done if I flip. I'm not winning, so who cares at that point? I can't flip. And I really do think that there is a lot to be said about that core group of 4 people who have kind of taken this stance that we're going to be strong and united together. No one is going to be flipping then if they get to rocks. They're just going to, who's going to flip? Mary's going to flip. Like someone else is going to flip, because there's no reason for any of them to necessarily, as we've already said, Star had no one. She had no social capital. She had no one that was looking out for her. And so when you are asking someone to go to rocks, you are asking them to really, like, you are all in this moment, and you're all in because you're so dedicated to this cause, and that cause is us. You don't have that when you do have, as you said, this ragtag group of people that have just kind of come together and decided this is what they want to do.
If I'm in the dominating alliance here, right, the one that you're trying to take out by going to rocks, who do I think y'all are trying to vote for? Because I think the initial pitch was supposed to be, we're going to vote for Joe, and they're all going to vote for Mary. So Joe is safe, Mary is safe. So if I'm Kyle, why am I going to rocks? Like, Joe wants to work with me, and also, like, we're not going to be able to get him out. Eva has an advantage. She might use her idol that we know about. You know what I'm saying? We also know about her safety without power. So are we going to rocks? If she uses her idol, then yeah, sure, we can go to rocks, but Eva safe, Joe safe. So now the options are Shaheen, Kyle, Mary, Mary safe. You know what I'm saying? Like that was not an opportune time to do that. Because at best, Mitch will probably go. Camilla might go. You got 2 shots. You're getting either Shaheen or Kyle out, or you're losing Mitch, Camilla, or Star. It's like y'all aren't even in the advantage in the rock draw at that point, considering they have other advantages over there. So it was never incentivized to me for anybody to do this plan anyway. It was just a bad plan. But for Star, it was all she had. I honestly wonder if they weren't pushing for the rock draw if she survives this and Mary just goes. You know, if she's just like, let's Mary go, and then maybe the pieces shuffle next week or next episode when it's at 7 and people are more incentivized to flip. I don't know.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that I do want to mention, and we talked about it a little bit earlier, was Star kept saying she didn't understand in her interviews. She didn't understand why Eva kept mentioning her name. And then she even said something about how it would be better to get rid of snoring Mitch than her. And I think both of those things underscore some of the stuff we've already said. I just don't think Star really understood at least some of the strategizing that was going on around her. You know, we saw on the show one reason Eva was mentioning her name, and it was because she wanted Mary to stick around, one more day. That was on the show right before the interviews that Star was doing. So, and you don't vote someone out for snoring. I'm sorry. You don't even suggest that you're going to vote someone out for snoring. That is not a strategic thing to do. So, that just kind of, those two things I view as kind of the cherry on top here for this rule.
Yeah. I don't know. If I'm Star, I'm thinking Mary's a bigger threat than me, so it's kind of like, why am I coming up? Mary's not in y'all's alliance. Y'all just blindsided her with David. Why do y'all need her? Y'all been saying
I'm talking about her asking it in interviews afterwards. Like, I think by the time interviews came around.
But even then, like if they're saying, okay, it's between Mary, Mitch, and Star, if I'm Star, I'm like, okay, I'm probably fine here. Mary was tied to David. Y'all claim that Mary was the puppeteer making David do all this dumb stuff. So why are you coming after me? What am I doing that is so threatening to you? And I have yet to find out. That's why I say the edit is awful because if we had seen people saying negative things about Star, leading up to this, then I would be like, okay, here are the things that she's doing to rub these people the wrong way. But for here, it just kind of felt like, no, let's just make it Star. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. We could all get
I'll have some other idea. I'll have some tidbits I found, I think, when we get to a couple of different places as we go along. But for now, let's get to the second rule, which says not to scheme and plot too much and to keep your scheming secret. And I think the biggest issue here revolves around different people saying that Star was chaotic. And now some of this did come earlier on to answer your question right away, Chappell. Most of it was, right now in this episode. But Mary said it. Shaheen called her a loose cannon. Charity called her unpredictable in her interview with Rob, weeks ago. And there were other things. Now, every interviewer asked Star about this. I found this very interesting because you could almost determine the order that the interviews were done because her answers seemed to get more focused throughout the day.
Yeah.
And so like when she talked to Mike Bloom, who must have been like the first one, or if not the first, the second, she said she didn't understand where it came from because she mostly sat in camp and people just didn't want to take the time to understand her. Now, certainly the latter part of that, may be true. And I'll come back to that in a minute. She told Dalton Ross that sometimes she would also try to get information from people and bring it back to her allies. So that's not chaotic, except that, of course, when those other people talk, including those who weren't really her allies, I can understand how they would see it that way. And then she gave what I thought was a more interesting answer to Rob, saying it was because she knew what was going on and she saw who was working together and she was making sense and she would tell the others. Now, I'm not 100% sold on any of that, especially since we already discussed whether or not she really did know what was going on. But the important part that she's definitely right about is that once someone says your name in that kind of context, it is really hard to lose that label. And so even if she was, by that point, what she said to Rob, 100%, I think it goes back to what she told Mike about others not understanding her. Because whether in real life or especially on Survivor, if someone starts saying a person is chaotic or a person is bossy or a person is lazy or a person isn't good at their job or whatever, it starts to stick. Confirmation bias kicks in.
Yes.
And other people start to see it. I remember going back to at my old job, someone would start saying, a boss would start saying, oh, well, that person's lazy. And then you'd always notice, oh, look, Dan's reading the paper again. Well, Dan's reading the paper. It's his break time. It's between 10 and 10:15. Dan's allowed to read the paper then. Don't hold that against him. But the bosses would because they'd already been told he was lazy. and it's a similar thing here. And it's even more the case, like on Survivor, you're looking for a reason to get rid of someone.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really do think that there's like perception becomes reality. We say that a lot too, where people will start to notice things by others planting a seed, which I will say is great gameplay. If you are the type of player that can feed that type of information just to make people look at someone a little bit differently. So you're not necessarily throwing them under the bus, but you're just making an observation of this person. Like, oh, Star seems to be gone a lot. Have you noticed that? Like, and then all of a sudden you start noticing Star's gone a lot. And then people are talking about Star being gone. And so I do think that there's a lot to be said about those types of things developing because there's a little bit of information that's shared and then that information continues. And also, Star is not necessarily helping herself in this regard either, because she doesn't have someone that's defending her, as Chappell's already pointed out. Like, no one had her back, and so no one is coming to her rescue and going, no, that's not true, because of X, Y, and Z. So it's so that narrative is just growing more and more because no one is getting in the way of it because nobody has any reason to.
Yeah, whenever someone says the word chaotic, I always read that as it would be peaceful if people weren't scrambling, right? And then you have the chaotic person is the one who's throwing out people's names, right? Who's bringing up stuff, who's making people panic. Right. Because how much chaos are you really doing at camp if you're not just bringing up people's name and making people run off together, right? And so Star, from her own words, I'm seeing things happening and I'm taking that information. I'm trying to get that information and take it back to my allies. And to that I say, what allies? Everybody is hearing their name from Star. Everybody is, because she doesn't have any allies. If she says I want Shaheen back, to Joe, Joe's telling Shaheen. If she tells that to David, David's telling Shaheen. You know what I'm saying? Like, those are the things that's the reason why, to me, she's chaotic. Is they like, for them, they just want to sit here, the final six, just pick off each other one by one, and everything be fine. But they can't, because now somebody's coming to, hey, Star said you were thinking about me, or Star said y'all were talking about, something like that. So yeah, I think when you don't have allies, everything you do is chaotic to the group that is like shunning you. So yeah, I think she's right. And then like, yeah, that the exact thing that she's saying is like, oh, this is my asset, is why the people don't want to work with you right now, because they're all linked up together. You're targeting the alliance and they're all aligned. You're just the only one not in it.
Well, right. And then she was also doing things like the secret scene last week, where she ran around asking people like Joe and Shaheen straight out, who do you see in your final three? And then when they kind of tried to, I haven't thought about it, she pressed them on it. Like I think Joe said, well, I haven't gone deep on it. She's like, well, go deep, and she, even putting aside the conclusions she drew in describing this all to us, if I were another player and she just randomly came up to me and started being like, you tell me right now who you want in your final three, I do think chaotic is a word I miite use,
Yeah. It's a little aggressive. It's a lot to be. It would be different if you have that relationship. If Evo goes to Joe and says, Joe, who are you thinking about final three? That makes sense, because they have that relationship. They have that they've built that trust with each other. But to have Star just going up to everyone and going, who's in your final three? That really puts them like on the spot. And no one wants to be on the spot when you're talking about something as significant as final three. Because if Star is not one of the people they're listing, then Star's going to be like, well, then I want to vote for them because they don't want to take me to the end with them. And yeah, it's certainly not a great approach when you are trying to get to the final three.
Agreed.
Yeah. I mean, even going back again, I had mentioned something that Charity said to Rob in her interview, that she was unpredictable. She added Star flips in a second. Well, then let's look at this, because, what did she do and say in terms of who she was targeting and working with? In episode 7, she was plotting with Chrissy to get rid of the physical threats. Well, who does she end up working with? You said it, Chappell. David, and then this week, Star was blasting people who just wanted to go with the majority. And again, I think, Chappell, you just brought it up a little while ago. She literally told us last week, you got to go with the majority or you're going to be next. So if I'm hearing this, day by day, changing, I'm going to feel completely spun around here.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Now in our preview podcast, I mentioned that I foresaw an issue with Star because her older sister and her sister's husband love Survivor and gave her a list of what not to do, including things like look for idols, but don't make it obvious. Don't say a name. Let the name come to you. She certainly did not follow those. But
No.
she also knew ahead of time it would be a problem. And she said in her pregame interview, I'm here for the information. I'm here to tell you the tea. So that right there, I feel will be my downfall because I'm not going to hold back, or I'm not going to hold anything back. Whatever happens on that camp, I'm going to tell it up in tribal council. And she did. Now, don't get me wrong. I loved it when she spoke up in tribal council because it was freaking hilarious. But she often said things that were probably better left unsaid, like emphasizing things that Chrissy and Camilla had said. And, Chrissy and Camilla are trying to say things a certain way, and then she just comes in and blows it all the way up.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, there's something to be said about not giving Jeff what he wants when you're in tribal council. Like you can eat a little bit. You don't need to give him all of it. And Star definitely was wanting to give it all to Jeff, to Uncle JP.
Uncle JP. And she didn't go to tribal council until the merge, y'all. Like that's the thing. Like she, imagine had she gone before that. I don't think she survived one of those things. Just based on what we've talked about. Like, how does she get through the first tribal council? Unless somebody does something catastrophic and blows their game up, she really didn't have the mindset of like, how am I going to get from point A to point B, in the preseason, when she's like, I'm probably not going to do that stuff. It's like, okay, well, it's not a winning strategy in the first place. I think it's kind of like she started off in a deficit and then like the hole just got bigger and bigger. I feel the same way about David, and to a lesser extent, Joe too. I feel like they don't really know the show well enough to be doing the stuff that they're doing, and so it's like, it's like I feel like you gotta have a baseline knowledge. You need to be able to recognize Jeff Probst when you see him.
And again, not to keep beating the drum on David here. I think the difference with him was, I don't know the game, but I am going to try to mold the game into what I think it should be.
Right.
I don't think we have necessarily Joe at least trumpeting that he's going to play his way, and he hopes to win. And in some ways he's shaping it, but he's not acting like he's not actively saying I am going to make people conform to what I want the game to be. And right. Star isn't either. She's playing her game, So, all right. Well, the third rule tells players to be flexible. Jessica, how do you think Star did here?
Oh, well, very flexible considering everything we talked about. She was like, let's vote for this person. No, we'll vote for that person. I'm going to vote for this person now. I mean, and I think, honestly, like she really didn't have a choice in the flexibility component because she had to be. She had no one with her who was actually her number one, her number two, her number three. She didn't have the numbers, which then required her to have to be flexible, but because she was so flexible, then it turned into being perceived as chaotic. So it definitely was not a good balance that she found in regards to this rule, because it did lead people to not trust her because she was so willing to consider all of the options no matter what they were.
Be flexible, but not too flexible. You know what I'm saying? Like, you gotta, but I agree. I just don't think she ever had the room to be like, this is my group and I'm sticking with them. Because what was the group? Where were they? I don't think it ever existed.
Right. Yeah. The closest she came was the ragtag bunch that she tried to pull together this time, I think. I
think maybe David, Mary, and Star almost was a thing last episode. I think like that was to me, that was the closest one. This was nothing. I don't think this was going anywhere from jump.
Yeah. Well, but the thing is, what we don't really know is, okay, David said he was cultivating a relationship with her. But did he intend to do anything with it or just use her and throw her aside?
Yeah,
I think it would use her and throw her aside. Yeah. But look, it probably would have been the first time someone had used her in a while. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's the thing. Nobody was including her in anything,
I know, which is so weird.
Well, and that leads to, another part of the rule, which says you need to have your finger on the pulse of the tribe. And, we've discussed already that Star certainly believed she had a full read on everything that was going on.
Yeah.
But it wasn't actually the case.
Yeah. No. Missing it.
No notes. Yeah.
All right. Well, the fourth rule tells players not to let their emotions control them. Now, Chappell, do you think she made her decisions emotionally, through strategy, or something else?
Well, it's hard to know because there are definitely times where like she's not in on a lot of strategic conversations anyway. We don't really see why, a lot of the things she's doing happening, like is happening she's doing or whatever. But I remember when she gave Eva the idol, my instinct was, oh my God, she swept up in the emotion of what Eva had just gone through, right? What Eva and Joe we had just seen this moment. I mean, the world was swept up in that moment. So I understood that. But I also was at home being like, no, don't do it. And then she says, hopefully it's an olive branch. I'm like, but did you do it because it was an olive branch? Or did you like, I did it and I hope that it helps, And so I'm like, maybe there's a world where that was an emotional moment for her. I will lean toward that as well, because I think strategically you just don't do that. Not at that point in the game where you're at the bottom and you're at the bottom and you've been at the bottom. Like, I understand that you want to get out of the bottom, but the best way of doing that would be like to play your idol, when you think the votes are coming on you. And so that's why I would like we didn't get a lot of emotion or anything out of just like exuberance from her. But I think in that moment, that was one of the times where I saw her and kind of thought like, oh, she's kind of engulfed in what this is, because to me, Eva being your biggest op, she could have done anything on that and I would have never given her that idol. Like the same way Star gives Eva the idol and Eva doesn't care. It's like we're not working together. So I understand that you're doing an emotional thing for me, but also you're not in my plans. So let's move on. Right. And I feel like Eva's big moment should not have swayed Star to make that determination about the beware advantage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Star was an emotional player in terms of just putting it all out there.
Yes.
Yeah. And I want to say, other than that one, I want to say a lot of her decisions seem to be based in what she thought was good gameplay.
Right.
But then she had to go and admit in an interview that she really wanted Mitch out because of his snoring. And when I saw the episode, I thought she was kidding, but then she brought it up again in the interview. And so apparently she wasn't. I don't know. Is wanting someone out for snoring, is that emotional?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, wanting sleep, I don't, I don't know.
Well, I think there is a lot to be said about someone who can just be so honest with how they necessarily feel about certain things. But that doesn't necessarily then turn into the decisions are being made because they are so honest with how they feel. And I do think that was something that we learned about Star, is that she was going to tell you exactly what she thinks, and she was going to do it at Tribal Council in front of everyone. And so I think in Star's world, that's just the way Star is. Star's going to tell you what she thinks, and she's going to tell you how she feels, and then she's going to make a decision. And so it's this weird, like, intertwined component of just who she is as a person. And when you're lacking the strategic gameplay that needs to be developed with that, it then can have an appearance of, was that emotional, and was that upon the wrong thing, as opposed to a strategic reason, because we've already talked about how she wasn't really making those strategic decisions. So it's tough. I mean, it's tough with someone like her personality to really decide where that line falls. But it certainly, I think, had an influence on how other people perceived her game.
Yeah. All right. Well, the fifth rule reminds players they need to pretend to be nice and play the social game. And while I think in real life, Star is probably an absolute blast and would never have to need to pretend to be nice, I do think that may have hurt her in the beginning of the game. And I think, Chappell, you brought this up earlier. Actually, you both might have. Like, she just assumed everyone would love her.
Yeah.
And she wouldn't need to put in work. And, going back to her pregame, she said she didn't feel a need to talk about her story with people, and they would just talk about whatever was happening in the game. Now, I think she eventually got past that. But again, if she went in thinking that at the start, I do believe it hurt her. And of course, the other issue that impacted her was the situation, again, with the beware advantage and her apparently taking so much time away from everyone else. There seemed to be a fair amount of footage indicating that Star wasn't around the group when they were having conversations or bonding or whatnot. Because remember when Joe made that big bonfire and everybody's like, everybody watching is like, where's Star? It's so
she wasn't there.
It's so mean for them to do this without Star. And it's like, I don't think they were being mean. I think just Star wasn't around for a lot of the time. And Shaheen even said, much like I did, that she didn't seem to be ready for the social part of the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think like if you come in already like you're saying like maybe not willing to share your story and all this other stuff, and then you're met with a wall as well. It's kind of like all those things happen at the same time, right? It's like she's not playing the social game as strong as she can, but then also they're forming alliances and now starting to push away from her. So they're like, hey, let's go do a bonfire. And they don't even, it doesn't occur to them to go look for her either. You know, it's like, oh, let's just do a bonfire. Star's never here. You know what I'm saying? It's just normal, you know? So it's not like, it's like by kind of like isolating herself, she's also like, it's like, they're all isolating her. She's isolating herself. And then they're also kind of like forming bonds away from her. You know, we just don't get a lot of Star in the season. So you have to wonder if she is having those conversations. You know, like I said, the editing is bad and I stand by that. But, you know, we might find out afterwards, like, no, me and Star had a really good relationship. It's like, well, how will we know? You know, but from what we've seen and what we've heard, nobody has ever said that. We haven't heard anybody in any exit press go out and say like, oh, well, you know, it was always me and Star and blank. I haven't heard that from anybody. So, yeah, I'd have to say that her social game was definitely lacking.
And I do think that there is something to be said about how your personality is and the type of person you are socially outside of the game of Survivor. Because you cannot be that same person when you are playing Survivor. And I feel like there was a disconnect here for Star, which probably came from the binge watching of all of the seasons. No one is actually who they are when they play the game. You have to be yourself, but you also need to conform to those that are around you, and you need to be very mindful of other people. And if she's just going into this game thinking, well, I'm charming and everybody always loves me, I'll be fine, and doesn't think she has to work towards getting people to like her and work towards forming those relationships, you can kind of take the fact that like you were the popular kid for granted when you play Survivor, because you just think, well, everybody's always liked me, so I'll be fine. And that's not the case when you play Survivor, because everybody comes in with a big personality and everybody comes in with a reason why they've been picked to play this game. So you might not be as cool as you think you are once you get out on the island. And she's might not be.
I mean, I don't think she necessarily came in, and this may even go to the way I phrased it earlier. I don't think she came in thinking I don't need to. I just think she didn't realize she needed to. Like,
well, that's what I mean. Like, it was just a natural thing for her.
Life. In regular life, I'm sure she makes friends and she's the life of the party.
She's so good at it, so you don't have to. So she thinks I don't have to work at it when I get there because it will just be a natural thing I'm really just good at. But again, Survivor is not real life. And, and you have to be mindful of that when you are going out there and trying to form these bonds. You can't be the way that you were at home and expect it to work. It's not going to work.
Right. And, you know, Chappell, you were talking about interviews, like we didn't hear from anyone saying, hey, I, you know, was working real well with Star. We got the opposite. Like Thomas told Mike Bloom, I love Star, but she never truly opened up to me. And I think there was a moment when she started playing hard and going and looking for idols quickly, which created a very natural, like, whoa, what are you doing? I wanted to work with her, but the idol thing made things so complicated. And I felt like she came to me last about the idol. So again, this circles back to when you start telling people about your idol one by one, someone's last, you know, and Thomas was last and was, you know, he remembered that. I do want to emphasize, you know, I loved what we got to see of Star's personality on the show.
Yeah.
Like her dancing up to the voting booth and then dropping the marker. You know, like that was hilarious. Her speaking up in tribal councils, well, not a good idea, was fun to watch. And then on the more serious side, we saw her connect quickly with Cedric and give him a truly heartfelt pep talk after he felt bad about causing his team's loss. And I mean, when I saw that, I was like, come give me a pep talk when I'm down.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Yeah.
But while those things were all good, they didn't move her forward in the game. Instead, she sometimes went backwards, like with Mitch. You know, I mentioned earlier, Mitch was trying to build a relationship with her by teaching her how to swim, and then she votes against him.
Yeah. And people will remember that, and Mitch clearly remembered that.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, Star also, I think she votes out Say at that split tribal council or whatever. It's just like the people that she could have connected with that were at the bottom, like like she was like letting them go, you know, like Cedric, you know, he goes, but that's not her doing. But Cedric and Say going back to back is awful for Star, also awful for Chrissy, you know. But it's like everybody was on board with it to save themselves, you know. Because then when they get to this point, they're like, oh, we're not playing the game. It's like, well, yeah, all the people that you would have played the game with. Those are the last 3 votes. Yeah, those last 3 votes are the ones that you need to upset this power structure of 6. It's like, bro, y'all know what number y'all merged at, right? Like, like there is nobody else. So yeah, I agree. Like you gotta make your connections, but you gotta make sure that they're meaningful connections that you can use, and then you can't let them go. Like, they need to be fighting for you, and you need to be fighting for them too. I don't know.
Right.
She did actually mention that with Say too, that was the vote that she thinks she really messed up on. She should have tried to save Say. Yeah. So I mean, hindsight is always 20/20.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Now, I do want to mention one question that many people have stemming from this week's episode is why Joe said Star is his kryptonite.
Yeah. Yeah. What does that mean?
Here is my feeling on this. And I don't have any inside information. This is just my read. Okay. I think, and I do know a few firemen. So I'm kind of, basing it around that too. I feel like he is used to dealing with people in a firehouse, calm, quieter people, solid people, that, you're not going to bust out into song in the middle of a firehouse. You're not going to do, start, doing crazy in his mind things. And Star is boisterous and funny and singing. So, I know, Chappell, you asked on Blue Sky, like someone tell me why. I didn't see an answer that was good there. And she didn't know in the interviews. This is my read on the situation. I don't know what you two think.
I think that's a pretty read.
Well, my question wasn't even aimed at so much Joe. It was more like, if Star has been doing things to annoy Joe, the show should have shown us that.
Yes.
It's like, we've never, all of a sudden Joe's like, you know who my kryptonite is? Star.
Right.
Really?
It comes out of nowhere. Yes.
Yeah. So that was the issue. Like, whatever the case may be, maybe she does, like you said, her personality is very much not the same as his, right? And people that he surrounded himself by, they seem a little bit more measured and calm in the game, So I could definitely see him being like, I can't work with Star because of that. But we never got that. We didn't get that.
Right.
We got this is my kryptonite. I was like, okay. Like,
and she went to Joe first about the Beware advantage. So you would think that there's got to be something there that we would have seen or learned. But then out of nowhere, all of a sudden, and he said it in such a way where he was like, people back home are gonna know. They're gonna see this and
they're gonna see this and they're gonna know.
Give us something then. Why? Something. That's a lot to say about someone.
Yeah. And that's where I was going to say too, the same thing as you, Chappell. It gets back to the editing this season. If you're going to drop a line like that in there, include the other part of the conversation.
Right.
He didn't just say she's my kryptonite and leave it at that. He must have said at some point or another, why?
Yeah. And if I'm hearing him say that on the island, I would probably go, well, why do you say that?
Right. Is there something else that we missed? Yeah. Right. And as far as the edit goes as well, when David and Mary, David has this moment, he loses that challenge. And then you get a shot of Kyle saying, yeah, it looked like for a second, David and Mary were, no, never mind. I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say that.
Right.
I was like, so why did y'all include that? What did it like? I thought we were going to find out later on that there was a showmance or something like that. Yeah. But we never get anything. We don't get any indication that we should care about that line. And I thought, my ears perked up. Like, what do you mean by that? Okay. And the show just left it out there. Like, nope. Take what you will. It's like, all right.
Yeah, it was almost like we're going to use this line to embarrass Kyle.
Right. Or to embarrass David, or David who is in a relationship he talked about,
right.
Maybe it's to make Mary look bad. Like, why did you do this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Strange.
No clue.
Yeah.
Very strange.
Yeah. It gets back to what we were talking about. The editing this season has been
trash.
Not great. Yes. Yeah. All right. Well, we could go to the 6th rule, which warns against being too much of a threat. Chappell, do you think?
No. No, in no shape, form, or fashion should they have been voting out Star this week. Nobody should have voted out Star this week. Nobody. Not one person on the tribe should have said Star is the one to go. Maybe Mary, because she was the other option. But no.
That's winner right there. Done.
What are you trying to say?
No. Yes.
No.
You know, like if you said like, well, Star's going to have one of those final 3 seats. No, she's not. No, she's not. She's not even in the main alliance. The one that's like, we're going to take out all these people one by one. She's not. She's not. They're not even entertaining taking her to the end.
Right.
She's not a threat. She's actually not a threat. She's not won any challenges. She does not have any advantages. We know that because she gave it away.
They pointed that out too. They even said like she's not going to win an immunity. It's like we don't need to worry about her. Yeah, like there is nothing about her existence that anyone is experiencing where they're like she's a threat. She's kryptonite apparently, but that's it. That's all we know.
And kryptonite is a threat to Superman. Okay, I'm just going to point that out.
And maybe she's not an asset to anybody, and that's why they can let her go. But I will not call her a threat. Nope, can't do it.
Yeah. I mean, the only person who could make that case a little bit is Shaheen because she keeps bringing up
she keeps saying his name.
Yeah, that's right.
Even then,
right.
To what allies? It's like, okay, sure. You know, all right. A threat. No.
All right. Well, I think that answers that one. So we can move on to Appendix A.
That was amazing.
Which discusses players keeping their end goals in mind when voting. And we talk about voting out the weak, then the strong, then the weak, then the strong. Now, last week, a strong player was voted out. And a lot of people expected or at least hoped for the same thing this week. But no, it went back to where it should be, someone who is in a strategically weak position, which is typical for this time frame. I think last week was more of an aberration caused by the way David acted. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, well, we have a whole 2.5-hour podcast on that. Go back and listen to. Now, I suppose some people might suggest Star was strong because she wanted to start a revolution and called other people scared and weak for not going along with her. But that's just not the case. While she may not have been aware of their reasons for not joining her, they all have their own ideas. I talked about this earlier. I said I'd get to it here. So let's take a look and expand on what I mentioned earlier. And we'll see how much you guys agree with me here. Starting with Kyle and Shaheen. They are sitting quite comfortably in what I'll now call the strong four. While Kyle was open to the idea of other people taking out Joe, he didn't want to be seen as the one doing it. Which, by the way, slight tangent here. When he says to Camilla, nobody can ever know. And Camilla's like, oh, nobody will ever know. I'm thinking, you better damn well believe if you two are in the final three together, she's going to be like, he told me to do it, Joe. He told me to do it.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Camilla's like, oh, of course.
Yeah,
no,
right. Yeah.
No. Yeah.
But aside from that, you know, Kyle and Shaheen, they are not stupid. I can almost guarantee they know Joe and Eva have to go. The question, as it so often happens, is when to do it. Because if they move too soon, they become the big new threats. And this is something we've seen season after season, especially in the new era, but even before then. If either of them took a role in getting rid of Eva, who, of course, was the only one of the two that was available to get now, they would instantly become Joe's number one target. He would focus all of his he would not care if he blew up his whole game as long as he took them down with them.
Yeah.
So, and I think that others who helped them take out Eva, if they had made this flip, wouldn't care which side they took moving forward. They would help Joe. They would help them just so they could knock out all that former alliance.
Yeah.
And then again, there's the whole issue that if they wanted to target Eva, they would have had to do so with perfect secrecy to avoid her using her idol or safety without power.
Yeah. And Star isn't real good with secrets, we've seen.
Yeah.
So I do think that might have been. And even, you know, it's interesting because one of the points that Mitch made was not being able to pull off a move like that because he can't do it with people he doesn't trust. But Mitch is one of the ones that's going back and telling Shaheen, Star's throwing your name out, you know? So it's like, so he's frustrated with not being able to trust these other people, this ragtag group that exists, but he's going and telling the strong alliance what's happening.
He's telling the person he trusts, you know, but
but it's just interesting that like, there's this like concern, like, well, I can't trust them. So I'm going to just throw them under the bus, you know, with the person that I can trust. Yeah.
Yeah. Now you mentioned, one of you just mentioned Star telling. I think a more likely person to tell, actually, this kind of just occurred to me now, would be Mary.
Oh,
Because
sure.
let's
Yeah.
say that Kyle and Shaheen came in and said, Mary, we need you to, we're all going after Eva. Da da da. Mary's going to turn around and go, hey, Eva, guess what? You know how you trust those guys? Well, you should trust me instead. And here's why.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a very fair point.
Yeah, I mean, unless you're like Mary, why would you want David and Eva? I mean, Joe and Eva in the games together, as well. And then it's like you also know that she has an idol. It's like I think that for me, the allure of flushing that idol and that other advantage that I think Mary might be the only person who doesn't know about both of those, because David was left out. Maybe Star didn't know about the other one, but everybody else knows.
Yeah,
and so maybe like to me, like I know it would be tempting to go back and try to flip people, flip Eva back to your side, but why would you want Eva in the game at this point? Like, what is she going to do for you?
It gets Mary off the bottom.
Well, that's the thing. If Eva goes here, then you have Joe versus a bunch of pairs. You actually have Joe versus Kyle and Camilla, and Shaheen doesn't know that. So Shaheen thinks it's Shaheen and Camilla, but also Shaheen and Mitch. And then you have Mary and Star. She's not seeing that bad of a spot. Like I don't think it's like as bad as it could be. And then you don't have Eva with the idol and the advantage as well, and the potential immunity threat that she is. Now, Joe is a problem at that point, but all he can really do is win to save himself. Right. And he can't, how is he not the biggest target on the board at that point? Who's voting? Yeah. I would say who's voting out Mary over Joe, but they just voted out Star over Eva. So I don't know what I'm talking about. But at the same time, I feel like that would give me more wiggle room. Maybe she doesn't feel like she has that connection or whatever. But personally, when you get to the point where an advantage is about to start wearing out, I just assume people are going to start to play them. And this is around the time where I'm like, we got to get these people out before they start to protect themselves a little bit more. So like I said, I don't know about like maybe the rock draw, that was kind of weird. Like I don't think they would have done that. But if they had a clear shot at Eva or Joe this week, I definitely think they should have took it.
Yeah, I just don't think they had that clear shot. And I think they were waiting for a better time. And that's the thing. I think some viewers have been acting like this was the only chance they would have. And because they didn't do it now, that's it. It's over. But there are still plenty of opportunities. And there are times when Eva won't have her trinkets anymore. It seems
at the final five.
Well, I guess I forgot. Yeah, well, at the final. Oof.
Yeah.
Basically, yes.
Running out. I do think that it's interesting to think about Mary for just a second, though, because there is a world in which Mary has potentially convinced herself that she will win if she gets to a final three, because you've got Joe telling her you're the mastermind. It was because of David went because of you. So he's feeding her this information. You have Eva that was doing the same type of thing, and you also have Mary who has that. I'm the last one left of the Vula tribe, and I've survived all of these tribal councils. I've had to go through more than anyone has. I've been able to still formulate relationships and bonds. And you've got David sitting in the jury. And David's going to be hating on anyone else who's sitting there except Mary. And so you could have the biggest advocate possible sitting in the jury for you. So there is a lot to be said about Mary's capabilities in a final three and what it could look like, depending upon how ultimately pissed off the people in the jury are about the people who are sitting there. I mean, they might feel offended, they might feel slighted, and we know David does. So I do think that there's something about Mary.
Yes. Yes. So moving on to Kyle, I think we've been left with it as a question as to whether Kyle is willing to take these later opportunities when they arrive. Personally, I think he will. Yes, I mentioned earlier, he had that confessional about what the jury might or might not like. And, but he has to know he can't beat Joe and or Eva at the end. And he also knows that Joe and Eva on their own cannot control the game. So, moving forward, Kyle can help pick off people, whether it's Mary or Mitch, and then use his alliance with Camilla and maybe use Shaheen, maybe use Mitch if they go a slightly different way, to turn on Joe and Eva at that point, or just some variant of that, because this is something we've seen in other seasons. Like, when do I make my move? I don't want to make it too soon or else I get picked off, but I don't want to make it too late or else I can't, and we're in fire making. And, Shaheen's in a similar position, I think, with his, presumed relationship with Mitch. It'll be a question of what happens when.
Yeah, but the when is running out of time.
It is, but
if Joe wins immunity next round, who's the biggest threat? Eva, right?
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
And Eva has 2 advantages. So now what? Who's the biggest threat now? Is it Kyle? Is it Camilla? Or are they still going to be like, I guess we got to get Mary?
Mary.
You know, like
Mary.
what do we
gotta
exactly?
Get rid of Mary,
you know, we got to get rid of Mary. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's like, you're running out of pieces to make the move with. You know, you pick off Mary this time. If Joe wins the next immunity, then what? Well, Eva still has another advantage. There's that thing still. And then, you know, who's the biggest threat? Is it now Mary's gone? So is it Kyle? Maybe. Is it Shaheen? Maybe.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Well, you're running out of space, you know?
Right.
And so that's why I'm like, it'd be different if they didn't know about the advantages. I would be talking about this way differently because they wouldn't know that they need to be
and that's a fair point. Yeah, they do know about them, and that definitely changes things for sure.
Yeah. So
So
who knows what's going to happen? I want to live in a world where they do make the thing, but they make the move. But also, Survivor's funnier when people are mad, and people would be mad if they didn't do it. I kind of like that.
Yes.
Yeah. I was not rooting for David to go home last week. I was like, no. He gets the people going. Let them stay.
Yeah, he does. He definitely gets people started.
You didn't know viewers would be mad for a whole different reason. So
yeah.
Now I was going to go through and also talk about like Mitch and Camilla and stuff, but I realized we've already talked about them before. We've talked about why they didn't go to the rock draw. We've talked about where they stand. So the one thing I will say is that, you know, when Mary approached Mitch, she said, are you willing to go to rocks? Because instead of being at the bottom of an alliance of 6, you could be at the top of an alliance of 4 with her, Camilla, and Star. And I immediately wondered, what does it mean to be at the top of the alliance when he was literally the last person that Mary asked?
Yeah.
And, you know, is there really a top to that 4-person alliance? No, they're all equals at that point. I don't think at best, they're equals. At worst, he's at the bottom, which is probably where he was. And, you know, it doesn't do any good for him to go from the bottom of one alliance to the bottom of another.
Right.
I mean, but the bottom of 4 just puts him in fire at the final 4 tribal. You know, final tribal, you know,
if they make it that far.
If they make it that far. Yeah. So it's not an awful pitch. It's just like, how are you? Yes. Okay. He come with us. We draw rocks. Shaheen goes here. Now, what does that do for Mitch's place in the game? Not much. Eva and Joe are still there. Kyle's still there. Camilla's still there. Like, you know, so it's like, it's an okay pitch. It just it doesn't yield enough result for Mitch to actually care about it.
Right.
Yeah.
And he, you know, let's say that someone did flip and therefore Shaheen, the target, was gone. Well, he's lost the one person that he seemed to be working with. And if they all stuck to it and went to rocks, well, then it was more likely that someone in the ragtag group, including possibly himself, could be gone. So that certainly doesn't help. So, yeah.
It's not great.
No. All right, we'll go on to Appendix B quickly here, which does deal with the jury phase. And we talked earlier about Joe and Eva's clumsy and obvious attempts in this regard. But here's the thing. They were both trying to get Mary on their side. And so this goes back to a little bit, you know, the question that was asked at the very beginning, why Star instead of Mary? And I really do think, as much as it seems like a little thing, if you're telling Mary, if you are 2 different people who seem to have a lot of control in the alliance, and you're 2 people saying, Mary, we'll keep you for one more vote because we like you and we want to be honest with you. And we, you know, they're just sucking up to her for her jury vote. And if all it costs them is keeping Mary instead of Star in a split vote, why not? Why not do it? And I really think that was a big part of the deciding factor between Mary and Star.
Well, and also Mary doesn't have her shot in the dark either. So I think that's a small consideration as well, because they know that they don't need to worry about that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, Star is Joe's kryptonite, so he just can't allow that to stick around much longer. You know?
Although he seemed to win challenges with kryptonite around, so that, that metaphor seems to fall apart there.
Still haven't figured out what he meant.
Yeah.
We'll be waiting for the exit press on that one. Like, please, Joe.
I mean, somehow I doubt anyone will.
Means.
I don't think anyone will even remember to ask him that. You know,
they better.
You know.
Yeah.
We want to know. Inquiring minds want to know, Joe. So please.
Right.
What does that mean?
All right. Well, with that, it is about time to wrap things up. So,
Hey.
Chappell, what are your final thoughts on Star?
Man, I think Star would have been a great character if we had seen more of her. I think that I like what we did see, but I also think that if Star has this big personality, hiding it behind David talking about milk, it's really just kind of like we missed that. We missed that on Star for that, or like I like Notting Hill, it's like okay, cool, but like you make David a big character that was well liked to have this like massive, like drop in popularity over the last 2 episodes, whereas like Star. We kind of liked her from the beginning, and then we see we give her visibility spike in this episode. We like her even more, and now of course we're all mad because we're like, wait, not only did they not make a move, but we also lost somebody who was entertaining as well. So I think Star. I don't ever want to see Star play Survivor again. I think it's too stressful for me. I don't want it, and I don't think her head's in the game. But I like what we got. I like what we got. I think that she did well. I don't think that there's a lot of worlds where she would get this far in most seasons of Survivor. If she loses one challenge in the pre-merge, I think she's gone. Making it here. Yeah, I think this is the valiant effort. I think this is the high point of what you can get from Star on Survivor.
Jessica, before you go, I do want to make a comment. Last week, we saw Star had a scene where after the swimming scene, she said, Jeff, when you call me next time, I'm going to be a swimming star or a swimming expert. And I was like, see, this proves that she's coming back on Survivor 50. And so I posted a video about that on my on my YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. And people started arguing like I was serious. I thought I made it pretty damn clear that I was joking about this. I did not really think this was true. And I had to post to one of the Facebook groups where I put this, like, I'm joking, people. And one person came back and said, well, I thought it was pretty obvious. I'm like, yeah, you did. But apparently these other people did not.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. Jessica, when you come back on 50, you got to align with Star or else.
Yes, that's right.
I know. I have to. I mean, this is happening.
Yeah. I'm going to take that clip, post it on social media, and use that as proof.
Spread the word. Star and I are in an alliance.
That's right.
Season 50. Just putting it out there. Everybody
Final
know.
2.
Yep.
You heard it right here first.
Right. Rockstar. It'll be she and I.
Exactly. She's wearing the shirt, y'all. I'm not making this up.
You will literally be the Rockstar Alliance.
It's perfect. All right, Uncle JP, let's make this happen, okay? All right, this is happening. Oh my goodness. I will say that I appreciate Star for so many reasons, but I always love in the pregame press when they're asked like about their superpower and what they think their superpower is going to be. And she thought it would be her charm. And she actually said, I got a good way with words. I'm a person that really doesn't have to think before they speak because the words just come out so naturally. And I think that's a good quality to have. Of course, sometimes I do have to think because you can't just say everything, which this is where we fall into that little bit of an issue with Star, right? Where she did kind of say everything and not necessarily at the best times that would have allowed her game to flourish and move forward. So I do think that Star came into this game wanting to be a great Survivor player, but she was basing that desire to be a great Survivor player on limited information. And that limited information was the binge watching of all of the seasons in a really crammed amount of time, not allowing herself to really process and truly understand how she needed to play. She talked about Sandra being one of her favorite players and that she thought that she could emulate things like her. That's a big lift right there. That's a really big lift. And while I can appreciate Star's personality, I don't see her having that type of personality in order to play this game. So while I think that we had some great fun moments with Star and she gave us a lot of really interesting commentary and funny things to laugh about and also appreciate, her gameplay was just lacking. And unfortunately, she didn't have, as Chappell said, the social capital she needed to really push herself through this game because she got caught up, I think, in the idea of what Survivor is as opposed to what actually Survivor is. So, Star, you were truly entertaining. But listen, you and I, Rockstar, season 50, it's going to happen. So we'll spread that rumor. And there we are. Those are my thoughts on Star.
Now, Jessica, you just mentioned something that reminded me, Mike Bloom asks, or maybe it's in the regular pregame interviews, everybody, what is your superpower? What is going to be your kryptonite? So really what we need to do is go back to Joe's pregame interview.
Mhm.
You've solved it. What's
And
the kryptonite?
see, what did he say his kryptonite was? While
And
you
when
were
he
talking,
says star.
I pulled up my summary and I didn't have it mentioned there, but I don't have the full thing. So maybe that's the answer.
Ooh.
After the podcast,
That
we'll
is
have to
the
look for it.
answer. We're finding this. That is the answer.
All right. Well, I loved every minute Star was on the screen, but that was for entertainment value, not strategy. She believed that she had the strategy aspect down pat and knew what was going on all around her. As I mentioned earlier, Kyle said Star talked like she was the godfather. She had faith and exuded it, but her faith wasn't backed by facts. She probably got a few things right, but not enough to truly be able to use that information to maneuver. Plus, she even said in her interviews that when she came to people and told them what was happening, they didn't listen. There were likely a few reasons for that. One, they weren't aligned with her, so why would they listen to her? Two, she may well have been telling them things they already knew, but we're okay with. Like, hey, those people are together, and they're like, yeah, we know. Three, we talked about how at least some of them saw her as chaotic, so they may have just chalked it up to that. Or indeed, the times when she said things like this might well have been part of the reason they described it that way. In trying to stage her revolution, Star said she had spirit, and spirit goes a long way. But it really doesn't in Survivor. Strategy and relationships will get you much, much further. She could have all the spirit in the world, but it wasn't going to convince Mitch to make a move that he deemed as going against his interests. And whatever plans people like Kyle and Shaheen have going on to overthrow Joe and Eva, Star wasn't a part of them. So all her spirit also wasn't going to make them change their minds about that. Star said sometimes people are scared and weak when you're trying to start a revolution, adding, the whole point of Survivor is fighting until you can stay alive and keep fighting for the $1 million prize. She was sort of right about that part. The whole point is fighting to stay alive and getting your opportunity to go for the win. For the other players, she wanted to do that. Risking your game on a rock draw to save someone you don't trust didn't fit into that. Making an unnecessary move now that would draw attention and make you a target too soon goes against that idea. Star was on the bottom in large part thanks to things that happened early in the game. She acknowledged that by the time she talked to people in her original tribe, they already made tight bonds with other people. But that's because of how she chose to play the game at that point. Whether it was specifically because of the beware advantage, or as she said, she thought everyone was getting along well, so she didn't want to talk strategy. Either way, she essentially put herself in that position. She thought she might have found a way out of it when she handed the idol over to Eva. But pretty much as soon as the merge hit, she was right back on the outside again, if not sooner. And the one person on the inside who wanted to keep her around a bit longer was the same guy who told others they weren't allowed to have side alliances and got himself voted out last week. That left her in an untenable spot. Almost everyone had their own plans to move forward, but her only hope was to get them all to drop those plans and join the revolution. But she didn't have the social or strategic standing to make it happen. And that is why Star lost.
Here we are.
So, all right. Well, before we get to our predictions for next episode, I do want to remind everyone that the rules we just discussed are available in poster form, or in poster on a t-shirt form, or checklist on a t-shirt form. And you can, of course, get those by going to robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed. Other things you can do on the internet is find us. Chappell,
right.
for anyone who doesn't know how to do that, if you're a stranger to them, where should they be looking for you?
Yes, if you don't know me, follow me on all social media platforms at Recap Kickback. That's the name of the podcast that I do here on RHAP. It's where I talk about whatever I want to talk about, and it's a good time. You can go over there and subscribe on YouTube, youtube.com/@Recap Kickback. And also you can go to recapkickback.com/subscribe. You can also go to the Nothing But Netflix podcast. That's where I'm hosting and talking about Netflix shows every week, nothingbutpod.com. So that's where you can go and subscribe to that. And then you can catch me on RHAP, talking about Survivor sometimes, Club Condo. I don't get to talk about the strategy. This was fun, but I don't get to do this often. I get to be goofy and ask more cutting questions than the ones I asked today. The questions I have are more about, Jeff, if he's tying people up more often, that kind of thing. Those are the questions I asked on Club Condo. So check that out on RHAP too. But David and Jessica, thank y'all so much for having me.
Oh,
Oh my
absolutely,
gosh. Yes,
absolutely.
this is great.
We're still gonna need
So
your
much fun.
predictions.
I like the strategic Chappelle. This is
Yes.
nice. I enjoy this very much.
He's about to go to bed. He's done. He's done. Like he's done. And I won't make another strategic claim for the rest of the season probably. But this was so much fun.
Good. Very good. Well, listen, you can also look for me on Blue Sky, Twitter at Jessica Lewis 89. I'm also on Instagram at Jessica Lewis 6789. I am not nearly as in the social sphere as you heard Chappelle talk about all the places you can find him. And David Bloomberg, who is also someone who is all over the social scene, so much so he has a link tree that allows you to find all of the places that you can find everything David Bloomberg. So, David, take it away.
Yes, you can find me all my accounts on Linktree/David Bloomberg, or you can find me more directly on Blue Sky as at David Bloomberg. Go to Blue Sky, leave the other place, leave the bad place, come to Blue Sky. Also, as far as videos, I've been posting 3, sometimes more, on YouTube, or every day on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram as at David Bloomberg TV. Right now, they're almost all Survivor 48. Last week was mostly ripping apart David in different ways, which a lot of people seem to enjoy, really, judging by the numbers. I also have, a couple videos for Netflix's Battle Camp, which, Chappelle, I know you covered. And one of the videos I posted, I believe you caused. Apparently you caused Trey to act the way he did, and then everybody hated him for playing a game in the game.
That was me. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. How he acted on Squid Game, and I told him, don't do that again. Don't embarrass me. And so he stepped it up. I was proud of Trey and his chaotic gameplay.
Yes. But for some reason, I guess most of the rest of the people there saw the camp and thought that's literally where they were. They weren't there to battle, just for camp. And then I'll also probably have some videos on the Genius game from the UK. Speaking of which, I will be back co-hosting the Tradar podcast special coverage of the Genius game. The show has 2 episodes per week. We'll be doing 1 podcast to cover each of those 2. So watch for that probably Sunday night. So
excellent.
With that, we have predictions. I'll go ahead and go first.
Oh, I love this. Good.
Unless either of you want to.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I know Jessica doesn't want to. So from the preview, we saw more of Kyle saying he doesn't want to hurt people, but then also adding that every path harms someone. And this suggests to me that maybe he realizes he's going to have to make his move soon. No matter what, no matter who it hurts, he's got to make a move. We also saw Mitch saying, we need to get them to flip. And Mary telling Shaheen, there's a move to be made. And then Mary getting pissed off and taking it out on a coconut. So, trying to read into what the preview is not telling us is made a little bit more difficult because of the contradictory scenes involving Mary. Does she say something that could make Shaheen go along with it, or does she get frustrated because nobody will? That one's a tough call. But we've been talking about this a bit. Final 7 is typically a place where the group could cause a big flip. But then we have Eva's trinkets. If she and Joe get any hint that something could be happening, even if neither of them win the immunity challenge, she can piece out a tribal council and give Joe the idol.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's possible a flip could happen in secret. It would need to be super tight-lipped. They would not be able to tell anyone. Because of that, my immediate instinct is to once again predict that Mary goes. I mean, I've been predicting it this many times. Why not just keep going it?
Yeah.
But I'm going to try for something different this week.
Oh, okay.
Mostly because I don't want to get yelled at by Brooklyn Zed. But after those 2 confessionals by Eva, I think enough people are indeed going to come together against her and manage to fool her and Joe. I think that they are going to not believe they need to play anything. And I think Eva is going next.
Yeah, that's your winner pick.
I know.
Oh, that's spicy, David. I like
That
that.
is spicy. I like it
That.
too.
I like that. It's
Mhm.
chaotic. I like that. I like the chaos. And because also if you get through that, then the next round, we get angry Joe. You know, like Joe's going to be
yes.
furious, and that's the kind of TV I need. And so
Yeah.
yeah, I need that. I need that. Don't vote out Joe before Eva. Let go send Eva and have her sitting over there on the jury looking at him, and he's like they're making eyes across the room. Give me that. Give me that. I need that. Yeah.
I will say though, there was one very interesting statement that was made by Joe where I don't know if he said it to Eva, but he definitely said it, and it was, I will essentially I will lose my game for you. Like he put that out there. And so I would be very fascinated to see what would happen if there was any sniffing out of something about going against Eva, and that Joe really does put his game completely on the line for her. That would be fascinating. That would be fascinating.
Like she could play the idol and save him, but he's like, no, it's okay. Keep it for yourself. Yeah. I would burn the internet down.
But that's what I'm saying. Like I feel like that moment is going to happen. I mean, he is going to lose this game for her. That's what I'm predicting. Not necessarily this next vote, but that's what I think is going to happen, is that Joe is literally, he's going to give her immunity. He's going to do something to save her, because he actually said that out loud, that I will lose this game for her. So I'm going to go with the easy prediction and say it's Mary. I just feel like, we want all of this like deliciousness to happen, but I feel like they're going to be so afraid of all of the trinkets and these things. And if it's the next vote that allows her to have safety without power, that's the only time she can use it, right? Yep. Like then they're like, 7. Okay, if we get past that, she doesn't have it anymore, then we're down to just the idol. I don't know. I just feel like that's just where I'm gonna be, because I want to see Joe like blow up his whole game for her. I just think that would be like, holy shit,
such good TV. It would be crazy.
Right. This is what I'm saying. It'd be so entertaining. Yeah.
Okay, I'll pick something else then. I think that Shaheen's gonna win immunity, and Joe is going to be exposed. But like David said, they're not going to think that anybody's coming for Joe. Eva has this safety without power, so she's going to use it because she can only use it at 7, and she's going to leave Joe with the wolves, and they're going to vote him out. And then she's going to find out when they get back to camp, when Joe doesn't walk up, that the alliance of 4, they're strong, is no more.
Oh, love that. Okay, these are great predictions. I'm just saying, all 3 of you are like super spicy.
We should be writing this season, whether it happens this way or not. We should be writing this season.
We should be, because this is so much more interesting.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it would be so good.
That would be crazy. Yeah, be absolutely crazy. She's just like, all right, bye, and she takes her idol with her and like doesn't even think about it.
Because they're so locked in. There is no reason why she would even give it to him. And
yeah. Or like Jessica says, he says, no, I don't need it. Don't give it to me.
I don't need it. Keep it. You need it.
You keep it. To get you through the next one.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's see.
All right. Well, as we wrap up, I want to encourage people to check out the RHAP patron program at robhasawebsite.com/patron, where you can get access to all the special podcasts that are put out just for patrons, including one I believe you do, Chappell, during the Big Brother season, which is...
They're going to start putting me behind a paywall more often, David. I said they're going to start putting me behind a paywall more often, David, because during the Big Brother season, I get to say a little bit more. If Club Condo moves behind a paywall, we're going to have a good time. That's all I'll say.
So yes, there's that, and there's many other patron only shows, plus Facebook groups, Discord, the good Facebook groups, not like the one I was talking about. I mean, that's a good group too, but it has some people in there who are questionable. You can support shows like ours and everything on the network by becoming a patron at robhasawebsite.com/patron. Also, make sure you're subscribed to all the RHAP Survivor podcasts by going to weknowsurvivor.com, where you'll see the list of all the different podcasts, like, for example, Club Condo, and us, and Know-It-Alls, and the B&B, and Survivor Global. And you select your podcast service of choice, and boom, they all come to you. It's just that simple.
It really is. And we would like to thank the whole RHAP team, especially Scott, Jess, and Doug, for all of the incredible work that you do with the editing, not just for the Why Blank Lost podcast, but all of the content that you just heard David mention. You all do such amazing work, and you provide so many avenues for people to listen and love and appreciate the shows that they like to watch with all of this great content. Thank you also to Will from America for the theme song that plays on the audio portion of the Why Blank Lost podcast. And Chappell, thank you so much for joining us. This was absolutely lovely. You have such a way about you in all of the podcasting worlds that you exist in. So it's great to see this side of Chappell. This has been absolutely so much fun. So thank you for joining us. This has been great.
Yeah, thank y'all for having me. Like I said, first time, but I'll come back. It'd be fun if y'all want to have me. Yeah, I'll come back. Yeah,
absolutely. Yes,
great time. Yes. This has been a pleasure. It really has.
Yeah, let me add my thanks. It was a lot of fun, and Jessica, happy to have you back. So thank you for returning to us here. And
here I am.
We will see everyone in a week or on social media before then. Make sure to watch Club Condo for coming on Monday, and we'll see everyone soon. Bye.
This is RHAP. We know reality TV.